So, as what I have dubbed and been calling quite rightly, and what everyone else seems scared to call it, the Labour Civil War continues to rumble on. So we're going to read essentially an interesting article from The Guardian by a guy called Nick Cohen. And it's called Don't Tell Me You Weren't Warned About Corbyn. Now, from the very start, I have said I like Corbyn's policies. I think he's an honest politician. However, he's not a leader, and that will cause him problems. And you can go back through my videos and see I've been saying that right from day one. And the main problem is that he has not had the ability to rally and inspire the party behind him. And that, as I've said, will cause him problems. So we go on to see what Nick Cohen has to say about him, and particularly the Corbynistas. So, as supporters of Jeremy Corbyn read The Observer, you could rest of all the talk among yourselves. You can, while I speak directly to them. You should know that there is a faint chance Theresa May will call an early election. She says she doesn't want to, and it wouldn't be difficult to arrange, but May's also said that she doesn't want Britain to leave the European Union, and look where we are now. Perhaps Channel 4's exemplary investigation into Tory campaign expenses will force so many by-elections May will think, what the hell, let's go the whole hog. Perhaps she will say that she is an unelected Prime Minister who needs a personal mandate to govern, and a political mandate for her vision of Brexit. Do you still believe that the far-left politicians and journalists who promised you that you would have shifted the Overton window by now? The code piece of jargon purportedly describing how political discourses changes came from the American right. Appropriately enough, you might think that because far from being a new consensus from previously unthinkable leftist ideas, Corbyn's victory has allowed the right to run riot. I won't insult your intelligence by asking whether you also believe the bullshit that you were fed about a genuine radical Labour Party attracting people who didn't vote to turn out for him. There was never any evidence that there were these secret socialists. I understand too. And that will be a cruel now to drag up the old boasts, but now how the left will win back the Scottish nationalists now that Corbyn is so unpopular, even Scottish Tories can walk all over him. Still, you could not forget that those boasts were made, and with that bullshit was fed to you. On current polling, Labour will get around a quarter of the vote. Imagine, though, how the Labour Party will fare in an election campaign where its leaders are Corbyn, John McDowell, Emily Thornberry and Diane Abbott, and its second consists of Clive Lewis, Angela Rayner, Richard Bergen and Rebecca Long-Bailey. The Tories have gone easy on Corbyn and his comrades to date for the transparently obvious reason that they want to keep them in charge of Labour. In an election, they would tear them to pieces. They will expose the far-left record of excusing the imperialism of Vladimir Putin's gangster state, the oppressors of women and the murderers of gays in Iran, and the IRA, and every variety of inquisitorial and homicidal Islamic movement, while presenting itself with a hypocritical pity as a moral force. Will there be 150, 125, 100 Labour MPs by the end of the flaying? My advice is to think of a number and then halve it. One senior Labour figure told me he thought Corbyn was endangering British democracy. It depends on the opposition being a government in waiting, which is what I've said all along. This is not how Corbyn is acting. Labour now looks as if it will be never in government again, and the 60% of the population who did not want Conservative rule are faced with Conservative rule without end. The only pressure for change is coming from an ever more audacious right. More troubling for you ought to be the question, why may a Prime Minister with a fragile majority not bother to call an early election? One cabinet minister explains her innocuous to this. He and George Osborne used to worry about how Ed Balls and Kachuna Yukomen would strike back against their austerity programme. Now ministers do not give Labour a second's thought. It ought to be a shame that you learn that. Ever since Corbyn promised to take the fight to the Tories, he and his hopeless frontbenchers have not forced one Tory minister to resign or even endure a sleepless night. The budget fiasco was exposed by journalists and Tories despite their help. Corbyn could not land a slap on May's wrist, let alone a punch. His feebleness was just an appetizer. Labour politicians who want to fight rather than pose say that they can see the right mobilising in demand to the worst possible Brexit. Britain should defy the EU and pay nothing or next to nothing towards the divorce bill, it will say. May has never once dared cross the Daily Mail, and she will agree that no deal is better than a deal. No deal is better than a bad deal, and pushes off a cliff with the only hope is that we can become a low-tax, low-regulation utopia as a parachute. Is this your utopia? A Britain you will be happy to live in? I assume, incidentally, that there will still be a Britain, even though I cannot see how a derided Corbyn can persuade the Scots to stay in the Union any more than he could persuade the rest of the country to stay in the EU. And I don't want to mock you when I say that I think of yourselves as blameless people. I just want to warn you that you will be blamed for the poverty and chaos that is coming. In 1968, when Robert Conquest published The Great Terror, his account of the vast crimes of the Soviet communism, left-wing critics accused him of being a Cold War warrior who was exaggerating to further NATO's cause. As the truth of his work became undeniable, Conquest friends Kingsley said that he should celebrate his book's vindication by changing its title from The Great Terror to I Told You So, You Fucking Fools. The same words will be flung by you at everyone who warned that Corbyn's victory would lead to a historic defeat. I accept among you there will be a true far leftists who won't care. You want and may get a radical Labour Party, one that will spend decades in opposition waiting for the glorious day when the voters realise their mistake. I don't think your imaginary victory is worth waiting for. You don't have a radical programme that a 20th century Marxist or any other serious thinker would recognise. All the left, or the fear of the left, is a babble of sneers and slogans. But let me be fair. You ought to, by your own lights, have a strategy. You are not complete fools. The majority of Corbyn supporters are another matter. Labour MPs are bitening their tongues now and letting Corbyn show himself for what he is. Next year, as austerity grinds on, we crash out of the EU to find ourselves Donald Trump's last ally. Then we will run candidates against Corbyn and ask for your support. That will be the moment when you need to look at your country and ask whether or not this is what you wanted when you first cheered Jeremy on. In my respectful opinion, your honourable response will be to stop being a fucking fool and change your fucking mind. So this is essentially, really, when you look at it, a call from Nick Cohen to essentially get Corbyn to step down and really change the party, because this idea that a radical Labour Party, again, is what we've been told and what a lot of these people are saying, is outlandish. And a lot of people are very happy, in this radical position. They are very happy for Labour to be, the government in waiting for the next 10, 20, maybe even 30 years. As it's been stated, they want the electoral people to realise that there's this, that they were wrong, and then they'll come back in droves. But that's not going to happen, because there is some form of plan that, Corbyn has laid out, but he's not being, trumpeted as well as it could be. And his appalling lack of front benches is very worrying, and should be disturbing to anyone who wants a good democracy. For a good democracy to function, you need a good and strong opposition. And Corbyn has assembled nothing in the form of a incredibly weak, front bench team. And you may say, well, look, there's all these people sitting at the back, but they don't want to, share the bench with Corbyn, because they know he's not a good leader. They know that if they took up that front bench position, all the goodwill that they might earn could be lost because of Corbyn, because, as it said, he can't slap May's wrist, let alone land a punch. So a lot of what you see now are literally the war going on, and this hasn't ended here. So what happens next? Well, in our next video, we will explore the new movement to reclaim the Labour Party called Momentum. So, we will see you hopefully in the next video.